KoitCast.
Hi Pamela, welcome back to KoitCast.
Hi, Koit. Thank you for having me back. It's such a pleasure to be here with your audience again today.
We
Thank
had a
you.
good time last time, didn't we? So I thought let's inflict it on everyone again, that good time.
That's right. It was lots of fun.
Exactly. So here we go. Since we last spoke, have you projected yourself out of your body again?
Actually, I have. I had
Oh,
a
good.
very, a very strange experience early Easter morning. So this would have been the morning of April 20th, approximately 3:30 in the morning. I don't sleep a lot. I usually sleep for about 3 hours, and then I'll wake up, and then I grab some milk, and then I'll sleep another 3 hours, and usually it's time to get up. So I operate on very little sleep. So it was my typical night. I woke up around 3:30, came downstairs to the kitchen to grab a glass of milk, and was standing at the kitchen counter um, finishing up the milk, and noticed I have a direct view out the back door into the backyard, and noticed just this bright orange glow lighting up the entire backyard. So I stepped over to the door, took a closer look. We have a corner light for security, but that's a white incandescent bulb. So it would not account for this orange glow that really was lighting the entire backyard. We do have street lights around at the front of the house, but those do not project into the back. So it really baffled me. I stood there for a few minutes wondering what this could be. I turned off the alarm system, stepped out onto the deck, and I could clearly see all the trees, the grass just lit in this orange glow. Um, so baffled, I just came back and inside, reset the alarm, went back upstairs, and went to bed. And I typically sleep on my right side, so that puts me facing the security pad. And given my insomnia, I have sticky notes over all of these little lights, on the DVR and the alarm pad, but still I can see the red dot of light through the sticky note indicating the alarm is set.
Okay.
So I know I was in bed staring at that red dot. And then the next thing I knew, I was downstairs standing in the middle of the living room. And I heard footsteps coming downstairs. And I thought, oh, Frank's up. He's coming down. And so I turned to look at that doorway, and out walks a woman dressed in like a World War II Navy nurse's uniform. It was navy blue, a double-breasted coat with the gold buttons, below the knee length skirt, white hat, and she's walking straight towards me and then through me. And I turned and looked in her direction, and the front door opened. She goes out, but curiously, the alarm did not sound. But I'm standing in my living room. I know I'm there. And then I'm back in bed, and I'm staring at that red dot again. But I'm awake, and I'm thinking about what just happened, and thinking, what the heck was that all about? The next minute, I'm back downstairs in the living room. I hear multiple footsteps coming down the stairs. Out walks like a man dressed in a Revolutionary War era outfit, carrying the long rifle, the clothing, and multiple people behind him dressed in different period clothing, like from the 1800s, early 1900s, men, women, children, flooding through this door, some going around me, some going through me, and they're all going out the front door. And then I'm back in bed again, staring at the red dot, and I'm thinking, please stop. I don't know what's happening, but please stop. And then I find myself at the foot of the stairs and I hear footsteps. Our upstairs area is divided into a bedroom and a library. So I hear a lot of footsteps over in the library area coming around through the bedroom and down the stairs. I turn, another flood of people coming past me, around me, through me, again, dressed in different period clothing, and back out through this living room out the front door. So I'm back in bed staring at the red dot, and it occurred to me a portal has opened. These people are passing through a portal that just popped in my head. Once again, I'm back downstairs, but this time I'm to the right of the bottom of the stairs in this office. And there's a door that opens onto the back deck that I had stepped out of earlier through the kitchen door to look at the orange light. That door was open, and here come another flood of people. This time it included my mother and a very dear friend who passed away last summer. She was like 70 years old. It was very unexpected. So it's my mom, my friend Gwen, and I felt something at my leg, and it was my cat Henry, who passed away on April 20th, 1 year earlier. He was 17, and he goes out the door. So then I'm back in bed, staring at that red light, and then I fall asleep. So I wake up the next morning. Of course, that's the first thing on my mind. I rush downstairs, tell Frank what I've experienced. And I thought about it all day. What could this mean? What could this mean? And, I thought about, okay, it's a sacred day. I'm not religious. I don't practice any type of religion, but I'm very spiritual, and I do recognize Easter as a sacred holiday. And I thought perhaps the sacredness of this day, for some unknown reason, helped these souls migrate into the light. And perhaps the orange glow I saw in the backyard was somehow connected to this event. But what was equally strange, and of course I was thinking about the Pope that day. He had the strength to go out and speak to the crowds there in front of the Vatican. And I was thinking about him and how, even though the Catholic Church, has, a tainted history, he did such great things. He was a good man, a good spiritual person that really pushed the limits beyond what most of his predecessors had practiced. And so he was in my mind. And then the next day, I wake up and he's passed away. And I had communicated what had happened to me that Easter morning to a group of friends. And one of the ladies emailed and said, perhaps, this was a precognitive event of the Pope's passing, or perhaps, just his energy helped these souls migrate. It's really an unknown as to why this happened, but I have dowsed my property. I've located the 4 cardinal points, and there's an intersection of high energy in my living room. And that's where the dowsing rods always cross. And I've located an underground artesian river that runs west to east, not east to west, but west to east. So there's quite a strong energy pattern within that living room.
Is that
And
the direction of travel that they went down?
it would be, yes.
Interesting.
So um, that's my latest kind of out of body experience because I would feel myself in my body in the bed staring at that red light, but then I really felt myself experiencing this with these souls. I was not dreaming. It was not a dream.
It's a strange one as well because it's almost like you're pulsing in and out in a way,
Yes, yes.
which I've not heard
Um,
before. So that's a nice one.
so I was pretty exhausted the next day, more so than usual, from just lack of sleep. I just felt like I'd really worked that night. Not that I was responsible for any of this. I don't take credit for helping. Someone said, "Oh, you helped these souls to the other side." I didn't. I didn't do anything. I just was a witness to this migration of souls. And I find it interesting that my mom and my friend and my cat, was part of this.
Did anyone acknowledge you?
No, except the cat. I
Hmm.
did feel the cat against my leg, but they all seemed really oblivious to me, um, because some were like passing through me and just going around me. And so, no, not even my mom.
It's weird that they're also obviously coming downstairs and then going out a door, which presumably, if you look at this on a historical level, your house hasn't been there for hundreds, thousands of years. So it can't be literally they're in your house going out. So it's obviously a metaphor for something, isn't it? For coming and
Passing
going,
through.
passing,
Yeah,
migrating, as you
yeah.
said. Um, but from where and to where?
I don't know. It's interesting that there were multiple historic layers. I know that the original structure on this property does date to the 1700s. Um, and the road out front was called the Old Wagon Road. And there was Revolutionary War era battles fought in this area. And of course, a lot of Native Americans. I have a 350-year-old oak tree in my front yard. So there's a lot of history. The original structure was a log building that was probably mid 1700s.
So it could be then that the house has stood, and then those are just people within that time window that were there at one stage. That's a possibility.
Yes, and this house that I'm currently in was the main structure was built about 1890. So it's quite old.
You know, when you were first talking about it, the first thing that came into my mind was past lives, right? Until you mentioned your mum and then the cat.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
my first thought. That's obviously not that.
yeah, and to see, the first person to see was this World War II naval nurse. I don't know,
Have you tried to look her up?
I haven't. No.
I wonder if you could find some sort of register of the previous owners of your property and then see if you can search for archival photographs. If there's a World War II one, in theory, she will be there.
Yeah,
You might be
I
able to
know a
find it.
lot about the history of the house that it was within the Poff family, which is a German family of Moravian religion, and that the Moravian immigrants came from the Black Forest of Germany into Pennsylvania and migrated south into this area.
When you went downstairs and you spoke to Frank, what did he say? Or is he used to you telling him everything now and thinking, oh,
He
okay?
he is. He's very used to it. He said, "Oh, just another one of your experiences." He was not at all surprised, and he's had his own experiences here in the house. We've had lots of strange things happen over the years.
Ah, so you'd say your house is haunted, and I say haunted not in an evil way, but you know what I mean.
Yes, he saw an apparition at the bottom of the stairs, the same stairs that all of these people were coming down. this was at least 35 years ago. We had a den upstairs where the library is now, and had watched TV kind of late into the night and fallen asleep and woke up. So he was the first one to come down. We then had our bedroom in another part of the house. And I heard him come down the stairs, and then he stopped and he said my name, kind of like Pam. And, I said, what? And he didn't answer me. And so I can't come down the stairs, and he was just white as a sheet. And he said, I just saw a glowing figure at the bottom of the stairs. And there's a window that faces the street off the hallway in another room. And he thought perhaps it was a street light or a car passing. So he put his hand out, and when he did, it disappeared. And we went back and we did some troubleshooting and just to see if it could have been coming from the street, and it wouldn't have been. And the way he described it, there was a form to it, but it was just a glowing figure. And at that time, we were having a lot of activity, knocking in the walls, objects being moved. And I tied it to a painting, an 1800s painting of a little girl. Um, so we took that painting out of the house, and that intense activity stopped. Um,
How did you locate it to the painting?
Through meditation, and just kind of some focused mindfulness, and the knocking would always be near that painting. And the way he described this apparition, it was not a large adult. He said it was more
Okay.
childlike. And the painting was a little disturbing in that I did some research into the history and learned that the little girl in the painting was a twin, and she was part of the Haynes family, the Haynes underwear, that originated here in Winston-Salem, or actually in a nearby smaller town, and then moved to Winston. So we knew the Haynes family, and we were able to do some research into that painting, and it came from the original Chatham estate. And there were two little twin girls, Amy and Jenny. And Jenny was jealous of Amy, and she set the house on fire. And Amy died in the fire, and that's who was in the painting.
Whoa.
And so there's a little more to the story. We ended up buying a lot of those furnishings that came out of the house. Not everything was destroyed. And Mrs. Haynes offered the items to us for our antique shop. So we went up to this warehouse and bought like a flatbed truck full of antiques, and the painting was part of that. And we noticed when we unloaded everything into the antique store, everything was soot covered. So it clearly there had been a fire.
Mm.
And I did some research and actually found an article in an old archival newspaper. So anyway, I think it was Amy trying to get our attention, but it was just a little too much. I just said, let's just take the painting out and try to put her to rest.
I don't
So
blame you on that one. Isn't it weird that spirits and that can attach to an object?
yes,
Very strange.
yeah, that happens quite often.
Yeah, you see it in movies and you think to yourself, yeah, yeah, yeah. But then now I'm hearing an actual story from you telling that it does happen, and
Yeah.
it's such a strange scenario. But yeah, you did the right thing. I'd have got a shot of that straight away out the window. Off you pop. Stay out there. Right, let's move on. Now, last time we spoke, you mentioned or alluded to a near-death experience in your 30s. What is the story?
The story there is it was 1990. I was in like the last 2 weeks of my senior year in undergrad. working on my undergraduate degree. And I was also working double shifts at a local gourmet restaurant. So, as you can imagine, studying for final exams, working lunch and dinners, I was pretty stressed out. And I'd had a history of ulcers throughout my college education, and they had just gotten really bad. And so, this particular night, it was a Friday night. I was working the dinner shift and I had run out of my ulcer medication and my stomach was just killing me. And a friend, typically she had some, but she didn't have any that night. So I was just drinking milk like crazy, trying to get through the dinner shift and just get home. So it was probably about 10 o'clock, waiting on my last tables, and I felt like a little pop in my stomach and the pain stopped. It was almost an imperceptible kind of pop, but the pain went away and I was like, oh, this is great. I don't hurt anymore. I can finish out my shift. So finished up, came home. The next day when I woke up, I felt a little sick on my stomach, almost like I had a stomach bug, but I didn't feel bad enough to let it stop me. So I went out and did some yard work, digging some plants out of the garden. But as the day progressed, I became a little less active and more nauseous and um, really just wanted to crawl in the bed. But we had a really nice dinner planned that evening at another, like a French gourmet restaurant. We were meeting four other people. And, waiting on tables, it's always a treat to go out and be waited on yourself. And I didn't want to miss that event, or I didn't, and I didn't want to disappoint my husband or our friends and cancel. So I went to dinner. I ended up having an entree with a cherry sauce and some red wine. But as soon as I got home, I became sick, started throwing up, and there appeared to be blood in the throw up. But I thought, well, I had the cherry sauce, I had the red wine. I even called Frank in, do you think that's blood? And he was like, yeah, well, you had the red wine and the cherry sauce. And so, we didn't think anything about it, went to bed. The alarm went off, I guess, around 6 the next morning. We were going to a flea market, and I just felt too bad to go. I said, you're going to have to go without me. I just can't get out of bed. And so he came downstairs. We did have our bedroom upstairs at this particular time. So he came downstairs, but I was so thirsty. I just felt like I'd trekked through the Sahara. I wanted just, all I can think about was a big glass of Coca-Cola. And we don't typically keep soda in the house, but I managed to get out of bed and call downstairs, please bring me a coat back when you come back into town. I turned to go into the bathroom and I don't remember anything else. He was stepping out the front door when he heard me fall, and he admitted later that he debated on whether or not to come up to check. But he thought, well, she hasn't felt well. Maybe I should go back and check on her.
No, he heard it and thought, nah, leave her to
Right.
it.
So he found me like wedged between the commode and the wall, and I wasn't breathing. My eyes were like rolled back in my head. He did manage to pick me up, put me on the bed. He started CPR, and he dialed 911.
Mm.
Well, when I turned to go in the bathroom, that's the last thing I remember. Lights out. I found myself standing on the top of a snow-capped mountain range. Um, and I looked down, I was in my like bare feet. I could see the snow beneath my feet, this mountain range to either side, vast, vast mountain range. Off in the distance, another mountain range, snow-capped, and in between, a deep valley, green, like an emerald, just so deep green. The colors really were indescribable. The mountain range, the valley, and then I took another look at the valley, and in the midst was a huge tree. And at that moment, it spoke to me like the tree of life. That's what popped in my head, the tree of life. And as soon as I had that thought, I'm under the tree. And there are just dozens and dozens of animals, every animal that you can think of. Elephants, lions, tigers, rabbits.
Pangolin? I'm thinking of pangolin right now.
I didn't see a pangolin, but I would have been
Right, that's
thrilled to
one
see
negative
one.
point to you.
But I mean, every animal imaginable. It was like a biblical scene, or something from Bambi. And they were singing. It was just like a chorus of all these animals just singing, and I felt such love and connection. And again, just the vividness and the colors and the life, it's indescribable. It truly is. Um, but the animals kind of parted, and from the middle of the animals out walked my Rottweiler, Holly, who I had the stomach pain on a Friday night. The Thursday before, our 14-year-old Rottweiler, Holly, passed away about 2 o'clock in the morning in the downstairs dining room. We had taken her to the vet. He gave her some medication, suggested we bring her home, but I just couldn't leave her alone. I sat up with her, and I was with her when she passed, like at 2 that early Friday morning. So here she comes from amidst all these animals, but she was young. She looked like she did when she was about 2 or 3 years old, just shiny and vibrant, and wagging her tail and jumping on me. And I remember just falling to my knees, and I was crying. I was so happy to see her, and I could feel her head, with my hands. She was so real, and she was licking the tears from my face, and it was absolutely beautiful. Just this unconditional love coming from this animal and all the animals around me. But off in the distance, I could hear Frank calling me. And it was just like he wouldn't stop. And then I thought, he sounds afraid. And when I gave into that thought, it was like I was being pulled back from that scene, pulled back from Holly, the animals, the tree, and the valley. And I came up to consciousness. I opened my eyes. He said, "Don't move. The paramedics are on the way." And it was at that point I had like what I've termed like a duality of consciousness. I sat up out of my physical body, my spirit self sat up. I could see my physical body beneath me and around me and the bed. And then I was over in the corner at the top of the stairs by the doorway. And at this point, the paramedics had arrived. I could hear them coming up the stairs. And then as they came up the stairs, my spirit self could see them. They, I watched them come over to my physical body, and they start putting like the blood pressure cuff on and the ECG leads. And in my physical body, I could feel that. I couldn't open my eyes, but I could feel these physical sensations of what they were doing. But I was also watching myself, which was really strange. But
Mm.
I saw them like put me on the gurney, and take me down the stairs, out of the house, out to the ambulance. I followed my spiritual, yeah, my spiritual self followed the physical self in the ambulance to the hospital. I continued to watch this scene of them working on me. A couple of times they coded me, family members coming in, but I could also feel what was going on, in my physical body. But the second time they coded me, I left completely. I could no longer feel my physical body, and I was complete spirit energy, um, just like flying through, it felt like through outer space. And when I kind of settled down, I was in a garden, this beautiful, lush, green garden. Again, I looked down, my feet are bare. I'm standing in this thick, thick grass. The garden is like tree lined, flowers. And then my eye is captured by like this shallow, sort of oblong pool, reflecting pool of water. And I'm drawn to go lie in this pool of water. And when I do, it's like it's vibrating. I'm being energized is the only way I can describe it. There's energy actually vibrating through me. And I just lie there looking up at the sky and the birds flying over and the tops of the trees. And then I just felt compelled to get out of the pool. And there was a nearby garden bench. So I go over, sit on that. And then to my right, I see like a wispy kind of figure forming. And as it comes closer, the figure starts to materialize. And it's a Buddhist monk. He appears to be like in his 40s, the shorn head. He's got on like an orange undergarment, and wrapped around kind of his neck and shoulders is a sort of a pinkish orange wrap. His feet are bare. I take in all of, his attributes, and he comes and sits on the bench next to me, and he introduces himself as Hotai. And he's my guide in this garden. And so I asked him, what is this place? What happened to the tree of life and the valley? And he said that was like just a halfway realm between the physical and the spiritual that Frank called me back from. But now I was pure spirit energy in this garden where I come before I completely go into like a non-physical existence. Um, so he explained that in the garden, I have 3 levels of learning. One is animal caregiving and healing. The second is plant caregiving and healing. And the third are the healing arts. And at each level, I have a different guide. Hotai is my guide just in this garden. And we get up and we walk towards a beautiful pasture, a pastoral scene. There are lots of animals like sheep and goats and
Pangolins.
cows.
Pangolins.
No pangolins, sorry.
-2. Sorry.
I would
Carry
love
on.
to see a pangolin because they're very prehistoric looking, very
Mm.
interesting creatures. But these were more like pasture type animals, that you would see on a farm. But anyway, so the little babies are like running and jumping and playing, and I'm part of this for I don't know how long. But anyway, it's so enjoyable. And I turn and I look back and Hotei's, watching, and I walk towards him. And when I turn, that scene is like dissipating into just a shimmering, multicolored sort of curtain is the only way I can describe it. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful, this shimmering of almost like an abalone shell, all the different colors. And he turned and said that, it was not time for me to stay in the garden, that I needed to return. And he started to dissipate. And when he did, I'm back in my body. I open my eyes, and these two nurses are standing over me, scrubbing me down. I mean, they had like, betadine is what that orange brown stuff they
Oh
put
yeah,
on you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so they're like squirting this stuff all over me and scrubbing me, and I'm like disoriented, what's going on? And they said, we're preparing you for surgery. And one went to get the physician to tell him that I was awake. And so he comes in and made the decision before taking me to surgery, he was going to do one last endoscopy. So what had happened was that night, that Friday night, when I felt that pop, I actually had a vessel burst. So I had been bleeding internally from Friday night until, you know, they took me to the hospital on Sunday. And I continued to bleed because they had done several endoscopies, but my stomach was so full of blood, they could not determine where the blood was coming from. They started a transfusion, and over time, I passed a lot of the blood out of my system. And so when he did that endoscopy that Tuesday morning, he saw the bleeder and he was able to go in and laser it rather than taking me into surgery and actually opening me up. So I was pretty much in and out of it the remainder of the day. I think he came in later that night and explained everything to me, that I had lost like 30% of my blood volume.
No God.
The transfusion had been difficult because I have Rh negative blood, and they had typed my entire family. No one was a match. It was difficult to find, but they did locate some, thankfully. And they just can't shove that blood back into you. You know,
You have to
it's a
drink it.
long,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just drip, drip, drip. And so it took a few days to stabilize. I guess I'd been in ICU for about 72 hours at that point. And I ended up remaining in the hospital um, until that Friday. And but I was completely changed after that experience, mentally, physically, physiologically. Um, it like just changed me energetically.
I got loads of questions I've written down during when you were talking there. Now, obviously, not obviously, but other people I've spoken to on the near death experiences, when they have them, they're often presented with a choice of going back. And yours wasn't a choice, was it? Because you just
No.
were not where you should be, and then now you are where you are. That's kind of unusual from what I'm hearing. What do you put on that?
Um, that it just wasn't my decision, that there's a higher power at play. And this, I've had several encounters with near death, and it really has never been my decision to return. There's always been like something else at play that, I'm told it's not your time, or, you know, you've got to go back. So I
And that
guess,
is what it is, yeah.
yeah. And, I was carrying, after I recovered, my father passed away and I became my mom's primary caregiver. So, possibly that was the reason. I had no
Hmm.
choice. I had to come back to care for her.
But it wasn't explained to you that that's what your purpose was, so to speak. It was just
No.
you came back and then carried on, so to speak. Um, I'm going to ask you a number of questions, and we'll start right at the beginning of the experience. You were on a mountain, looking down into the Green Valley. Did you feel the snow? Could you feel cold?
I could. I could feel the cold of the snow, and also I could feel once I was down under the tree, I could feel like the big roots of the tree and the ground, and so it's very real. And I've got the I've got the 100% knowledge that that is the true life. That's reality.
And this
Um,
is the dream.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is not the reality. This is where we just come, for soul growth or whatever. But that's real. That's the life. It was just so incredibly beautiful and loving and absolutely indescribable in terms that we have.
A load of people say that, and I've never. No, I'm going to rephrase this. A load of people say exactly what you've said about this unconditional love, and it's amazing and it's vivid and stuff. That just seems like then it's an amazing place for all of us to go, and therefore knowing it should just stop people having fear of death, shouldn't they? So they could just focus here and enjoying this bit while we're here, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not encouraging anyone to leave prematurely. You want to live out this life. There's a
Hmm.
purpose for your life here. But death is nothing to be feared. It is our true identity. The spirit self is our true identity. Um, and a lot of people would ask me afterwards, didn't you go through a tunnel? Didn't you see loved ones, friends, family? I never went through the tunnel. I didn't see any people other than Hotai. Um, they were all animals, but that's kind of been my focus throughout my life since I was a small child. Um, as a little child, I laid hands on animals after my first near-death experience and on plants. I could heal plants. And I'm not saying, as far as animals, I had this miraculous ability to bring them back, from traumatic injury or death, but I did have success in small healings that kind of gained me a reputation within the neighborhood. So animals have always been a focus for me. And so I'm not surprised that that's what I encountered
Hmm.
on the other side.
And doesn't it play into the whole? I'm sure you were the one that told me about the elephant head.
Yes,
So is that some measure of karma or coming in to then always look nicely after animals because of
absolutely.
part
Yeah,
of that? Yeah,
yeah,
interesting. Now another thing when you were talking about the going down from the mountain to the valley, the imagery is like going from cold to warm, and then like from nothing to life. Is it a choose life metaphor? Is there a choice there, even though you haven't got a conscious choice? You're not told, do you want to go back or not? It is a look, there's life, go back to it sort of thing.
Mm, that's interesting. That could very well be the metaphor. Uh, I've always sensed that I was standing on the top of that mountain range just to give me this incredible view of how vast and beautiful that dimension is. Because the sky was like that, the Kármán line, right before you, when you leave the Earth's atmosphere and go into deep space, it was that deep blue. So I don't know if it was just to give me an appreciation of just how incredibly beautiful and vast that realm is, or if it was a metaphor, of going from cold
Mm.
down to warm.
I'm
But
just throwing that out. I'm just throwing things, against a wall and seeing
yeah,
if they stick. You'll know you were there, not me. But it's
yeah,
an interesting
I
thought.
yeah, I think it was almost to give me that viewpoint to then look back into the valley and see that majestic tree, and then to go
I say, yeah, got
to
an
the
overview
tree.
of it, and then you were
Yeah.
there. Um, what is it about no shoes in the afterlife?
I think maybe to ground you into that realm, or
All cobblers have gone to hell. That's what. There's no
or
shoes there.
perhaps because I didn't have shoes on when I had the experience. I was in bed
Oh
and
yeah,
then
yeah,
in the
good point.
hospital, so I don't know. But maybe just to ground me, to to connect. You know, People are into this whole grounding thing, with
Mm.
the shoes. So maybe there's something to that.
Well, it is that whole connecting with nature thing. I like when I walk outside on a hot day, which it is today and tomorrow's going to be. I'm going to go outside barefoot because I like that touch.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
is good. It's nice.
yeah.
Um, when you saw the pool, this um vibraty pool, obviously it's got some sort of meaning or function is another word for it. But before we talk about that function, did you see your reflection in the pool?
No, I don't
Okay.
recall seeing my reflection.
I'm always interested in that to see if you look at it to see what you see, whether you see an orange orb or you are seeing your feet and then it's your whole body. Are you then young or are you the age at which you are when you had the experience? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Love
no.
to know
I
that.
just remember, being drawn to it and then just stepping in and lying down.
So, function then. What did you think that was for?
I think it changed me vibrationally because when I came back and I got out of the hospital and my husband was driving me home through these familiar neighborhoods, it was like I was seeing the world for the first time, the beauty and all the plants. And it was like it was April 23rd. So we had lots of, azaleas blooming and daffodils and tulips. And so I was just so captured by the beauty of all the nature around me. I couldn't stop talking about it. And when we drove into the driveway, I got out of the car. We have a long front porch, and the 350-year-old oak tree right off the porch. I often go out and hug the tree, but that day I could see the life coming from that oak tree. I knew she was as alive as I am. She is a conscious living being. And I say she because I feel the feminine that comes from her. And so I was just hugging her and connecting with her. And then I turned and I could see the irises and the flowers blooming in the yard and the energy coming from all of these plants. I mean, they were shimmering and the aura, I could see the aura around these plants. And I looked at Frank and I was like, can't you see all of this energy? And of course, he just wanted to get me inside and get me in bed. That was his primary goal. It took him forever to drag me inside. But for about a year after that experience, I couldn't switch on a light without blowing the light bulb, touch a lamp, the bulb would blow. If I went grocery shopping and tried to take items off the shelf, particularly canned goods, I would be shocked, like to the point of it hurting. and hear a pop, and sometimes like a blue arc. Um, Go out for a walk under street lights, they would dim. So energetically, I had been like ramped up, and I really think it had something to do with that vibrating pool of water. Um, and so, what was serendipitous about that, um, not only connecting to my childhood ability of healing, I started my professional career later that year at a local medical university. And they had a great complementary and alternative medicine department. So I'd always been interested in those types of things, and got to know the head of that department and a physics professor. They were both females. And so over time, I opened up to them about my near-death experience and, my experiences as a kid, and they were very open-minded and suggested we do some experiments in the physics lab. So we took seedlings of marigolds, and we had two trays. One we designated as the intervention group and the other as the control. And so both were under grow lights. They both received the same amount of water, but with the intervention group, I would perform healing, placing my hands over the plants. Well, actually, the tiny little seedlings, and they grew into plants. So at the end of 3 weeks, the intervention tray was like 3 times as big as the control tray. And so they also did some, I think I always have trouble pronouncing this, Kirlian photography. That's a magnetized plate that measures the coronal discharge.
The
That,
aura. Is it the aura one?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so they took some photographs of my hand versus their hands, and mine was significantly more charged as far as the coronal display. And I actually do have a photograph of my hand. Um, so, you
Could you send
know,
that to me?
I can't, and it's on my website.
Ah,
There's
okay.
some
If it's there, I'll look at it. Yeah.
photos when you go to my bio page. It sort of scrolls through some photos at the top, and that photograph is there.
Lush.
Um, so that kind of validated things, and so the head of the CAM department said, we have a great healing touch curriculum that we offer. And that was through the Department of Neurology. We had a really cool neurology doc that headed up the Healing Touch program. And so I enrolled in that and achieved a level 4 certification. And we offered that as a healing modality to the patients in the hospital. So I worked on patients and had quite a bit of success and easing their pain, and as did many others who also practiced that curriculum. It was very popular. The patients loved it. And so throughout the years, I've, maintained that certification, and I do work on like my garden plants that I start from seedlings here in the office, and once I get them in the garden, I work on them and on friends and family. So that experience, I think, really did sort of supercharge the abilities I'd had since childhood.
I was going to ask, how you just mentioned you work on friends and family. Does Frank get a lot of free service?
He does. He has an extra half vertebra in his back,
Whoa.
and that's called not scoliosis, but kyphosis. And so I routinely work on that area of his back to relieve that pain. And it's funny, I'll work on family members and like my sister had some really severe neck pain, and I worked on her. And I followed up with her about a week later. I said, "You never let me know if I was successful." And she said, "Oh my gosh," she said, I just got so used to having pain, I realized that I don't have the pain." And she said, I forgot to tell you. I was like, "Oh, thanks."
Well, that's how it tends to
But
happen, though, isn't it? Like when good things
yeah,
happen, you sort of fall into it and then just, that's the normal again now.
yeah.
You don't think. I understand that one. When you were out of your body, no, before we go back to that, I want to ask you about your healing. Can you heal yourself?
I don't work on myself. I've never tried. I just don't, my gut tells me that's not how it works.
Okay.
Um, I just don't do that. And there are some people that I don't work on. If I don't feel a connection, I just don't work on them.
Do you
And
tell them you're not working on them, or do you just sort of half pretend and then?
I just kind of, like push it out. I don't want to offend them. That's the
Oh, okay.
Southern girl in
Bugger
me.
off! I'm not working on you. Yeah, that's the best way. Um, yeah. So when you out of your body and you're on the stairs and stuff or on the landing looking at your body, you sort of bilocated sort of thing. Did you give a shit about your body at that stage?
No, no, I felt like disconnected from that body.
Hmm.
Really
And that's
did.
common. I'm hearing that a lot from the people I speak to. Like they just
Yeah.
don't care. It's a piece of meat over
Mm-mm.
there.
Yeah. I was
Sounds
more
weird, but it's.
curious.
Hmm.
Yeah. I was more curious, about, what's going on down there, but no desire to jump back in.
It's just a strange one that because obviously we all think if we're over here as a ghost, you think, quick, get back in. But everyone just seems to have this apathy that where they just don't care about the body. I find that
I
strange.
have had, occasions like during the tonsillectomy when I was 16 and I came out of my body in the recovery room. I was frantic to get back in my body because I saw how upset my family was that were around me at the
Hmm.
time. And so I did want to get back in, but that I never left like the physical realm during that experience.
Yeah, different layers, I suppose, different reactions. The Rh negative blood thing. Obviously, that's a trope played around in the alien abduction field, isn't it?
Yeah, so I've done some research into that, and a lot of mainstream scientists do want to say, "Oh, it was just a mutation that just randomly occurred," and there's really no basis for a mutation that would happen to make a female abort her child. I mean, that's basically what the Rh blood factor will do if you have a child or you become pregnant by someone who has a positive blood factor. I know they have a shot now that they can give you, but where's the sense in that? Why would that occur? And it did spontaneously crop up in the genome about 25 to 30,000 years ago. That would also be around the same time that the Cro-Magnon, the modern human, just sort of like surfaced. Here we were plugging along. There were different branches, on the hominid tree, including Neanderthal. And then suddenly you have these very almost brilliant, upright, modern humans. Well, was there some type of infusion, at some level into the DNA? I don't know. You know,
Mm.
I'm just kind of guessing, but I do have. my DNA, I've had my DNA analyzed, and I do have a fairly high percentage compared to most of the world's population tied to the Iberian Peninsula and to the Spanish Basque. And the Spanish Basque have the highest rate of Rh negative blood in the world. Um, so that's through my maternal bloodline.
Mm. It's interesting where this whole alien abduction thing comes in with it, with that. I'd love to get to the bottom of it one day. We're gonna move on from your ND experience because there's you've had loads of other paranormal experiences throughout your career as a human. So let's delve into a couple of those. Um, and then I want to mention. In fact, I'm going to mention it right here before I jump into that. Have you ever heard of brain tingles?
I've not, I wouldn't, for me, I wouldn't say brain tingles, but I do get like toe to head.
Flushes.
Yeah,
I get
like,
those as well.
oh,
Well, the reason I'm mentioning it is because I'm getting them now and have been for the last 5 minutes, and that's normally right. Weirdly, when someone's touching something of mine, it doesn't have to be a body part. I mean, like as an example, as a kid, when I had Star Wars figures, if a friend touched my Star Wars figures, I'd get brain tingles all over my head. It was weird, and I've been getting them the last 5-10 minutes, and I haven't had them for a long time, so I don't know what's going on here.
hmm.
Are you reaching out and doing weird stuff with your healing? Because I need it.
Not consciously,
Maybe it's a sly thing
maybe
across the internet.
subconsciously.
Sorry, I had to bring that up. That's why I spoke about it, but it was there, so that's why I'm saying it. Right, yeah, back to your career as a human. UFO sightings. You mentioned last time that your whole family saw their craft or the craft. Can you tell me about that story?
Yes. So this would have been the summer of 1966, probably about June. It was a month or two after those two beings appeared to me in my bedroom and the white elephant and all that happened. But anyway, so we were out on the front porch of our home, um, not yet dark, probably about 7 o'clock, something like that. We'd finished dinner. My dad was not allowed to smoke inside the house, so he was sitting out on the porch to have a cigarette. And my mom was out there, myself and my baby brother and my older brother and my older sister. And my little brother suddenly said, "Look." He was out in the yard and he was like, "Look," and pointed across the road. And above, like beyond this field, there was a huge stand of black Carolina pine trees that grow quite tall. Right above those pine trees just sat a silver disc, your typical silver disc with the dome, just sitting there. No noise, just sitting there in the evening, reflecting the western sun. My parents saw it, all my siblings, myself, we all saw it. I can't say how long it sat there, but then it just shot off. So that would have been to the east. It went directly to the west to Pilot Mountain, which is a very significant landmark in the area. Just gone out of sight in the blink of an eye.
That's a good one in that loads of you saw it, so it's a bulk of sighting. I wondered if some of your family hadn't seen it because there's that whole thing where some people can see a paranormal phenomenon and others can't, even though they're in the same place, looking in the same direction. But yours obviously must have been a true physical craft that was there.
Yes. And within sacred geometry, I've mapped the area with the help of a really good friend who is a geomancer and a scholar of sacred geometry and ley lines. And so that craft would have been most likely following the Serpent Lay, which goes from west to east, directly over Pilot Mountain and right within the circumference of the land that my childhood home sits on. So I think it was following that ley line, that is part of the Earth's energy grid system.
I wondered if it was that, whether they're using it as an energy to do whatever momentum they need, or whether they're using them just like roads, or I don't know.
I get the feeling that it's part of energy, their energy. They're using it for energetic reasons. That
Mm.
perhaps before they enter the Earth's astral plane, they have like a different form of energy. But once they come into this dense environment that's heavy with gravity, um, I think they may use this Earth grid for propulsion or perhaps to re-energize the craft. And maybe as a navigational system as well. I mean, it could be twofold.
Yeah, it could be two things at once. You know the ley lines things. I know you researched that quite heavily. Are they always on aquifers, or are they different?
I know for what I've researched in my area, they do very much follow this gigantic underground artesian river called the Appalachian Feathered Serpent. Um, I do think that water and the kinetic energy that is produced by these massive, massive underground rivers could feed into those ley lines. Um, it would kind of make sense that it's all like a symbiotic kind of relationship, the kinetic energy feeding into this ley system of energy. And um, I've got some theories, and I had a really strange experience. Maybe I can come back and talk about it, but it happened in January. Um, I have some photographs, and I did some meditating and received some information about where we are in the Earth's energetic cycle right now. So I think things are starting to culminate. There seems to be a rise in consciousness, and I know amongst the people that I communicate with, a lot are having experiences similar to mine, like the Easter morning experience. So I don't know if, things are just kind of culminating into this gigantic energetic thing that's getting ready to happen, but we are at the end of a pretty significant cycle in time.
Yes, then we'll have to speak about that because that opens up a world of possibilities. Reminds me of the Ghostbusters thing, actually, where everything's coming together for a big culmination of
Yeah,
some.
and you can actually track it through the geologic record, going back tens of thousands of years over the life of the planet, basically. You can I know they can do, drill down for core samples that go back tens of thousands of years, and see magnetic changes. And I get a little irritated when I hear people speak about these sudden polar shifts. We're going into a polar shift. Well, if there was a sudden polar shift, everything would be destroyed. I mean, we couldn't, if the poles reversed overnight, it would be total destruction. But they do reverse. but it's a very slow process that takes tens of thousands of years, and that is seen in the geologic record. And
Exactly.
so that's the period of time that's coming to an end, this polar cycle.
Exactly. Everything's cycle. Climate, magnetics, everything. There's oscillations here and there, and then things revolve and turn. And this is what gets me about. And I'm not being anti-climate science, by the way, because when a lot of people just say that in the comments, but we are such a small piece of material looking out of a very small window on such a huge time scale that you cannot say this is happening here. You don't know. You're just looking at one small piece of data. Everything's in 1,000-year cycles, probably, or hundreds of
Right.
years of cycles. I think everything just rhymes, revolves, spirals, repeats, etc. But we're not seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah, and even the scientists are saying, they've seen climate change coming, but it's coming at a much more rapid rate than they ever expected or ever predicted. And we've seen the energy of the sun change. That's been evident with the
Hmm.
aurora borealis going
Coming down
further
to
south
England,
than
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and down into the southern parts of the United States. I mean, it never comes south. So these coronal mass ejections, the CMEs, are occurring, and that coincides with this cycle of time. And you can look at the older Dryas period and the younger Dryas about 12,000 years ago. Um, that's basically, when you can see in the geologic record the Great Flood and other climatic changes. Well, that was halfway through that 26,000 year cycle. So we're now at the end of that second half of the 26,000 year cycle.
Where all hell breaks loose. The fun part.
Yeah.
Exactly. The sun has its patterns as well, doesn't it? It goes through
Yes.
expanding, retreating, heating, and cooling. It's all part of the same thing. And I heard not long back that we're in a Maunder minimum at the moment,
Yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
period of cooling, weirdly enough. But it seems like it's getting hotter, even though that we're in a cooling period. It's weird,
Yeah.
but I
Well,
think everything's bigger than we say it is.
yeah. So the melting, just cools the Gulf Stream. And that, then we go into another ice age. So it's kind of like
Yes,
Van Halen had the song "We're Just Between Ice Ages."
we literally are.
We
Yes,
we really are.
truly are. I know, but I don't want to be here when there's an ice age around. You know, I can't eat snow. I'm not doing that. Especially yellow snow. I don't go there.
No.
Right. I want to. I'm going to save a load to then for a part three in the future for us, if that's okay. And
Sure.
then we'll hit other things. I wrote loads. Look, that's what I do. I want to talk to you briefly before we enter the Koit zone for some more fun and games about famous archaeological sites. I know you'll be into that. So, Göbekli Tepe. What do you think that is?
I think that is a site that is much, much older than what the mainstream archaeologists are saying. That it was a site that perhaps aligned with significant star patterns during that particular time, um, and maybe a place to come gather for ancient humans to find healing or sense of spirituality. Um, but I know just from the carvings on those giant pillars that they were in a different era than what mainstream archaeology would have you believe. There are animals carved that should not have even been living in that area, say, what I think they say maybe it's 5,000 years ago or something. They've carved um, animals that would have been, across the globe.
Pangolins.
Maybe a pangolin. Yeah.
Come on, third time lucky.
And I think so that would fit into like that younger and older Dryas period. And perhaps that the way it was formed, again, it could have been an energetic system to protect those people during that period of coronal mass ejection that occurred. And perhaps that's the purpose of the pyramids. Um, they use them energetically to try to, you know,
Protection.
yeah,
Yeah, forming of some measure of force field. It's interesting with the Göbekli Tepe thing. Did you see Graham Hancock's documentary on Netflix? Did you watch that one?
I have not. Uh,
I'm sure it's on that program. Correct me out again in the comments if I'm wrong on this, but there was a whole documentary done on the carvings on the pillars, in which they looked at them and said each representation of an animal represents a star sign or a period in the sky, And then looking at those on each pillar, they could wind back history to say it was like 16,000 years old or whatever the date was. And that's what those animals represented. And maybe that is a signpost to say something massive happened here at this time.
right.
You could then argue, why is it buried? Did they bury it and then go inside and that's the protection from the CME? Or was it buried post whatever? And then that's the weird thing, because if it's buried post afterwards, why would you bury it? Because that's such a monumental task to bury that site. What's so evil about it? It would need burying.
Yeah, I think it would have been more for protection.
Mm.
And there's a similar area under, oh, I can't think of the name of the town in Turkey, another
Darren,
location.
is it Darren Kuyu? Is it that one?
Um, I'm not sure, but anyway, there's an underground city.
Yeah,
Yeah,
heard
that's
of that.
connected with a 5-mile tunnel to another underground city. And these two areas could have housed as many as 200,000 people. Mainstream archaeologists would have you believe is much more recent because they've uncovered tools and other implements that date to a much more recent period. But the pushback there is people could have sought that as a shelter during times of war. These archaeologists are trying to say, oh, that was created for a place to hide during war. Well, why would they create these massive underground areas for 200,000 people if they're just fighting a small war with a neighboring tribe? They would have used them, an existing location, most likely, just to protect themselves. So I don't think that the archaeological evidence supports the true purpose of these massive underground areas. So
Mm.
what were they going underground for? And my sense would be protection from these CMEs.
Yeah, or
Uh,
ice age, or fire age, or
yeah,
volcanic, whatever. Could be
yeah.
anything. But yeah, they're so intriguing, these big sites, and that leads us on neatly to the pyramids. Did you see the pyramid new stuff that they supposedly put out about the big structures underneath?
Um, I've, a couple of people have recently told me that they've seen some things, but I've followed Robert Scott, his work, and for years he's theorized that there are these chambers like under the Sphinx and the pyramid. So I think now with the ground penetrating radar and their other abilities or capabilities of seeing deep beneath the earth, they've been able to identify these massive underground areas. Um, so again, you know, they found absolutely no evidence that any bodies were ever buried in the
No.
pyramids, that, that they weren't built for tombs. So again, was it to for an energetic purpose to not only house people underneath for protection, but somehow to set up this energetic grid that would have connected to other pyramids and other, objects around the planet to push back on some of that CME energy.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
could
it's just,
literally be a force field, couldn't it?
yeah, yeah.
And I like that idea that we had force fields before the advent of Star Trek, the true advent of
Yeah.
Star Trek.
And so much of our ancient history was lost when the Romans burned the library in Alexandria that held thousands and thousands of scrolls from the time of Plato and Socrates and further back. I mean, so much of ancient history went up in flames that we'll never get back.
Mm.
Um, but I think, today we're starting to realize that we didn't just walk out of the cave and, you know, fumble our way into where we are today, that there have been intelligent, conscious societies along the way. If you look at, the age of the planet, 4.5 billion years, what are the possibilities there for past civilizations? We don't know what's beneath our feet from 100 years ago. How are you going to know from 4.5 billion years? And, if you go through, the Earth's been through, these cycles, these 26,000 year cycles, planet's 4.5 billion years. That's like, I don't know, I did the math one day, 153,000 26,000 year cycles.
Yeah,
So,
again, too big to comprehend almost.
yeah,
But yeah, you never know what evolved on this earth, had civilizations, and then left, or
yeah.
got crushed, you know.
We just think, because we're modern technological humans that we know everything. But, you look, the Industrial Revolution is barely 150 years old.
I
Uh,
know. And now we're sat
yeah,
here talking over the internet, which is such a foreign concept to anyone born just 50 years ago. Well, no,
yeah.
let's say 100 years ago. It's weird. Yeah, things
But we,
move quickly.
we know, the more we think we know, the less we really know. Um, as
Yeah, and I
as
know
far as
bugger
our
all.
as far as our ancient past.
Yeah, it's a lovely thing to ponder over, and I could honestly ask questions on the ancient past for days, but I'm not going to because that would be rude. So let's enter instead the Koit zone. Koit zone. So here we go. More random questions. Sorry, Pam. It's just how we do things
Okay.
here. When was the last time you fell over?
Last time I fell over.
Yeah.
Like physically or literally?
You can answer that however you see fit. But I was going physically and literally.
Um, I don't know.
Come
I'm
on.
pretty good at staying on my feet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If somebody asked me that question, I don't think I could remember it either. So I'm not going to put any more pressure on you.
I fell off a ladder about 12 years ago.
That's good.
Does that
That's
count?
good. Yeah, that'll count. Why did you fall off a ladder, by the way?
I was trying to get a cat off of the top of a cupboard. I was afraid she was going to jump and hurt herself. And instead, my feet got tangled up and I fell off the ladder and she jumped down and was perfectly okay. But I was all
Exactly.
bruised up
Do you think,
afterward.
right, if you climbed up a ladder into a tree, a cat would come and save you? The cat would look at you and not give a crap, would it?
Cat would just look at me. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a weird thing when you reverse it. What is the worst piece of clothing you own? Be honest.
Piece of clothing. Oh, that's hard. I guess this pair of jeans that I just can't bear to throw away, that both knees are ripped out and they have bleach stains on them, but
Why
I
are you
just,
keeping them?
because they're really comfortable. But I wouldn't dare wear them in public. And my husband keeps saying, when are you going to just trash those things? So I'd have to
Exactly.
say those jeans.
Okay, cool. I'm with Frank on that one. Get shot. You don't need them. Um, have any parts of you been replaced, i.e., teeth, hips, or anything like that?
No, I have all my parts.
Oh, well played.
It's real.
Well played. Um, when you were a kid, what were you always drawing?
Faces
And were
with
you good at drawing them?
I like to do charcoal and pencil shadow, sort of the shadow drawings, where you start just shadowing in
Fair play.
and then develop the face.
Have you still got any of those pictures from when you were a
I
kid?
do. Yeah.
Oh, quality. And if you look back at them, do you think, Christ, that's good for a 6-year-old or whatever?
Yeah, yeah, they are quite good. And I haven't attempted anything like that in a long, long time. I should get back into it.
So it's time though, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
there's only so much of it to go around. Um, what is the best board game?
I like Trivial Pursuit. I like the trivia.
Yeah, me too. It's a good one. What is the favourite cheese on that? What's your best colour? Is it going to be green? Because that's science and nature, isn't it? So is it going to be that?
Yeah, it is. I don't know. Orange came to mind for some reason, but maybe just
Orange
because
is sport, isn't it? Unless Americans have a different version.
I don't know. I haven't played in so long. My husband hates it because I always just beat him. He's terrible with
Love it.
trivia. So I have no one that I regularly play with. It's been a long time since played, but if I picked back up again, it would be Trivial Pursuit.
Cool. Do you have a favourite film?
The Shining comes to
You're the
mind.
second person that said that to me recently. Wow.
Yeah, I
Shining.
like The Shining.
Bit freaky in places, that one. Um, if animals of all kinds rose up one day to take on the human race, which would be the most feared army?
Cats.
Definitely.
Yeah,
They go ape shit and they don't care who they kill, do they?
yeah. They have the teeth and the claws.
That's it. Get back up your tree. Stay up there or on top of the cupboard. Um, what is the best place to go on holiday?
For me, the mountains. I enjoy going to the mountains.
Do you do like rock climbing or anything like that?
Not serious rock climbing, not with the ropes and all the gear, but the easy stuff. I enjoy like getting high up on the mountain.
Oh
Not
yeah.
getting
Oh yeah,
high.
yeah, yeah. Move on quickly. Ice cream flavor of choice.
Chocolate.
Good. I thought you were going to say hashish then. Chocolate is the correct answer, by the way. So you've wiped out those two negatives from earlier. You're doing well again.
Oh,
Right,
good.
last question. You are given a mystical golden ticket that allows you to travel to any place, time on Earth. When and where are you going, and what are you seeing?
I would go to ancient Egypt to see how they built the pyramids. How did they
Here's a
move those massive stones?
here's a question for you though. When are you going? Because what if you think, right, they're built 4,000 years ago and they're already there? Have you lost your one-way ticket or your trip?
Now, ask me that again.
Well, I said you could go back to anywhere and any place in time to go and look at something, right? And I appreciate what you said. You wanted to see who built the pyramids. But imagine if you go to, say, 4,000 years ago, because that's when you think they're built, and they're
No, I
already
think
there.
no, yeah, I think they were built much earlier. I don't buy into the 4 to 5,000 year period.
No, I don't either. I think they're way, way,
Yeah,
way, way old.
yeah. So I'd be going back to the older Dryas,
I just
about
hope you don't
12,
miss it. Yeah.
13,000. But then I could
Who?
see them actually being built.
Yeah, that's it. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Who is giving out this golden ticket, and why are they giving it to you?
Ah, gee. Maybe me in a past life.
Could be. That is mysterious answer and enter the Koit zone. Thank you for that one. So we will
Those are
move on to
hard.
this. Yeah, I'm sorry. We will move on to our final question. Is there anything you're currently working on? Since last time we spoke, have you got a new project on the go or finishing one?
I am working on a PowerPoint presentation and a video of the event that happened on January the 11th of this year
Interesting.
here in my home that has to do with a portal and time travel, and there are photographs and other information. So that's what I'm working on.
Will that be ready in time for when we next speak?
I have to have the PowerPoint ready by next Thursday
I was going to
because
say, because tomorrow is when our chat is. I'm joking. Right, portal, January. I'm going to write that down because that I need to get back to that. Okay, cool. Thank you ever so much. So I will be looking forward to speaking with you again, and when we're going to get through finally all these questions. We're good at them, aren't we? Though there's always more.
Yeah, it just opens up another can of worms.
More cans of worms. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
that. Right, so check out Pamela's stuff. Links in the description. Yeah, go and look her up. Go and enjoy and revel in all the stuff that she's got on her website. Pam, thank you ever so much once again.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, and thanks to the audience for listening.
Goodbye,
See
everyone.
ya.
See you on the next one. To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.